Finally, new rule, if you haven't seen all the crime happening lately on your TV, it's probably because someone stole it. As we head into the midterm election season, one issue that has risen to the top of voter concerns is a general feeling these days that the social order is breaking down, that there are no more safe spaces anywhere. Street crime, home invasions, carjacking, porch pirates, medical staff attacked at hospitals, incivility at sports arenas. And I think the Grubhub driver is eating my French fries. On airplanes now, the in-flight entertainment is a fist fight. This year, the LA City Council voted that every homeless tent had to be removed from dozens of locations. Yet, every freeway overpass still looks like history's saddest Coachella.
Good morning. It's Friday, Aristotle Friday, July the 28th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have Under Promise, The Virtue, No Free Lunch, The Rape of the Mind, Alex-Epstein, Newsmax, and Aristotle, Difficult Thinking Made Easy by Mortimer Adler. All that and more when I get back. Hi, I'm Ron. I'm tired of watching the good guys lose all the time. When you're right and you're losing the argument, you know that something is wrong. So I'm finding out what is wrong and righting it. I'm biased, not neutral. I am biased in favor of what is right and biased against what is wrong. I'm one of the good guys, a true conservative. The bad guys, however you care to define them, socialist, lefty, communist, liberal, rhino, are the ones that promote the wrong. The people that promote insanity, stupidity, immorality, and ugliness. That is what cultural and political arguments come down to. Right and wrong, good and bad, beautiful and ugly. Back in a minute. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now there's no free lunch. 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
I have never understood why it is greed to want to keep the money you have earned, but not greed to want to take somebody else's money. Thomas Sowell. This is the irony of the political rhetoric that saturates modern economic discussion. The never-ending ring of voices decrying greed are always doing so from a posture of wanting to take what belongs to someone else. We have turned basic definitions on their head.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now an Ayn Rand quote. Quote, "Nothing can corrupt and disintegrate a culture or a man's character as thoroughly as does the precept of moral agnosticism. The idea that I must never pass moral judgment on others, that I must be morally tolerant of anything, that the good consists of refusing to distinguish good from evil. It is obvious who profits and who loses by such a precept. It is not justice or equal treatment that you grant to me when you abstain equally from praising my virtues and from condemning my vices. When your impartial attitude declares, in effect, that neither the good nor the evil should expect anything from you. Whom do you betray and whom do you encourage?" Unquote. Back in a minute. Thank you. Under promise and over deliver. Under promise, over deliver is a strategy for managing the expectations and satisfaction of one's client, customer, boss, electorate, etc. It means that you communicate in ways that downplay what you will actually deliver by the end, and then exceed those expectations by doing more than stated or required. Back in a minute. Thank you. From The Virtue of Selfishness. Quote, "Observe also that moral neutrality necessitates a progressive sympathy for vice and a progressive antagonism for virtue. If I refuse to acknowledge evil, I will find it dangerous to acknowledge good. To me, a person of virtue would be a threat that could topple all of my evasions, particularly when an issue of justice is involved, which demands that I take sides. It is then that such formulas as, 'nobody is ever fully right or fully wrong,' and 'who am I to judge?' take their lethal effect. If I begin by saying, 'there's some good in the worst of us,' then I will end up saying, 'it's the best of us who make life difficult.' Why don't they just keep silent? Who are they to judge?" Unquote. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the rape of the mind.
The Mysterious Masochistic Pact. In Arthur Koestler's masterpiece, Darkness at Noon, he describes all the subtle intricacies, reasonings, and dialects between the Inquisitor and his victim. The old Bolshevik, Rubashov, preconditioned by his former party adherents, confesses to plotting against the party and the party line. He's partly motivated by the wish to render a last service. His confession is a final sacrifice to the party. I would explain the confession rather as part of that mysterious masochistic pact between the Inquisitor and his victim, which we encounter, too, in other processes of brainwashing. The term masochism originally referred to sexual gratification received from pain and punishment, and later became every gratification acquired through pain and abjection. It is the last gift and trick the tortured gives to his torturer. It is as if he were to call out, "Be good to me, I confess, I submit, be good to me and love me," after having suffered all manner of brutality, hypnotism, despair, and panic there is a final quest for human companionship. But it is ambivalent, mixed with deep, despising hatred and bitterness. Tortured and torturer gradually form a peculiar community in which the one influences the other. Just as in therapeutic sessions, where the patient identifies with the psychiatrist, the daily sessions of interrogation and conversation create an unconscious transfer of feelings in which the prisoner identifies with his inquisitors and his inquisitors with him. The prisoner, encaptured in a strange, harsh, and unfamiliar world, identifies much more with the enemy than does the enemy with him. Unwittingly, he may take over all the enemy's norms, evaluations, and attitudes toward life. Such passive surrender to the enemy's ideology is determined by unconscious processes. The danger of communication of this kind is that at the end, all moral evaluations disappear. We saw it happen in Germany. The very victims of Nazism came to accept the idea of concentration camps. In menticide, we are faced with a ritual like that found in witch hunting during the Middle Ages, except that today, the ritual has taken a more refined form. Accuser and accused, each affords the other assistance, and both belong together as collaborating members of a ritual of confession and self-denigration. Through their cooperation, they attack the minds of bystanders who identify with them and who consequently feel guilty, weak, and submissive. The Moscow Purge trials made many Russians feel guilty. Listening to the confessions, they must have said to themselves, "I could have done the same thing. I could have been in that man's place." When their heroes became traitors, their own hidden treasonable wishes made them feel weak and frightened. This explanation may seem overly complicated and involved and perhaps even self-contradictory. But in fact, it helps us to understand what happens in cases of menticide. Both torturer and tortured are the victims of their own unconscious guilt. The torturer projects his guilt onto some outside scapegoat and tries to expiate it by attacking his victims. The victim, too, has a sense of guilt which arises from deeply repressed childhood hostilities. Under normal circumstances, this sense is kept under control. But in the menticidal atmosphere of relentless interrogation and inquisition, his repressed hostilities are aroused and loom up as frightening phantasmagorias from a forgotten past, which the victim senses but cannot grasp or understand. It is easier to confess to the accusation of treason and sabotage than to accept the frightening sense of criminality with which his long-forgotten aggressive impulses now burden him. The victim's overt self-accusation serves as a trick to annihilate the inner accuser and the persecuting inquisitor. The more I accuse myself, the less reason there is for the inquisitor's existence. The victim's going to the gallows kills, as it were, the inquisitor too, because there existed a mutual identification. The accuser is made impotent the moment the victim begins to accuse himself, and tomorrow the accuser himself may be accused and brought to the gallows. Out of our understanding of this strange masochistic pact between accuser and accused comes a rather simple answer to the questions, why do people want to control the minds of others? And why do the others confess and yield? It is because there is no essential difference between victim and inquisitor. They are alike. Neither, under these circumstances, has any control over his deeply hidden criminal and hostile thoughts and feelings. It is obviously easier to the inquisitor than the victim, not only because the inquisitor may be temporarily safe from mental and physical destruction, but also because it is simpler to punish others for what we feel as criminal in ourselves than it is to face up to our own hidden sense of guilt. Committing menticide is the lesser crime of aggression, which covers up the deeper crime of unresolved hidden hatred and destruction.
So this is The Mysterious Masochistic Pact from the Rape of the Mind by Joost-Meerlo, M.D. But the word that keeps appearing throughout this book is confession. This is basically what the book is all about. How the left elicits confession. The whole purpose of torturing anybody is to elicit a confession. And you would wonder, you think initially, and I did, I thought, why do you need to do that? You got them there, put them on trial. It's a show trial anyways. You're going to go ahead and find them guilty because it doesn't stick. The person can come back later and say that it was a sham trial, it was a show trial, and that the witnesses were phony, and on and on and on. They can appeal, et cetera, et cetera. But with a confession, it is instantly believable because it is a statement against interest, and it's permanent. Once you've confessed to something, you play hell trying to unconfess. If you come back later and you decide you want to change your mind, try that sometime. Try confessing to something you didn't do and then coming back later on and trying to get it undone. Good luck. And so the reason that this is important is because what is happening to former President Donald Trump is nothing less than torture. Nothing less than torture. And also for his family and supporters. This is torture, and the whole point of this is to elicit a confession. Either an outright confession in which former President Trump confesses to crimes that he didn't commit, or he simply resigns, he quits his candidacy, resigns his candidacy to become the next president of the United States, which is tantamount to a confession. And the reason that's important is because once he confesses, then the left in this country, our enemies, can simply expunge his entire political career history from the record books. They can literally start working on pretending that Donald Trump never existed. That's why this is important. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Alex Epstein.
Well, automakers, meanwhile, are cranking out more electric cars, but there is a big problem. There aren't enough buyers. Unsold electric cars are piling up at dealership lots all over the country. Here now is the Center for Industrial Progress founder and CEO, Alex Epstein. Good to see you, Alex. Thanks for being here. Now, EV sales account for about 6.5% of auto sales. They are increasing, but the sales just aren't keeping up with demand. The demand just isn't there to buy all the cars that are made. Why do you think this is?
Well, because this is something that's not being chosen by free people deciding what's best for them. It's something that's being coerced. Now, even with all the coercion, we're at about 6%. Mind you, Biden wants it to be by 2032, he wants it to be 67%. So he wants to dectuple it from where it is now. But even now, what you've had is all these EV makers have been pressured or incentivized or cajoled into producing more EVs than the market wants. What we should have is a free market EV policy where people are free to make the best EVs they can, sell them on the market, but not be subsidized, not be mandated. That way we can have better vehicles and we can have EVs as our grid is ready for it. Right now we have a catastrophically declining grid and then a catastrophic planned increase in electricity demand via EVs. So it's just a total government dictated disaster.
And that was Alex Epstein. And the problem is that with what he was saying is he could have summed this up much better by simply saying determinism is dead. Environmentalism is all based on skepticism. This situation with the EVs and switching over to getting rid of gas stoves and things of that nature is based on an error in thinking called determinism. It's got its own little name. And determinism is the error in thinking that pretends that people have no free will. And the politicians decide that you don't know what you're doing, that the only reason that you buy an automobile or that I buy an automobile is because we were out of our minds. We just don't know what we're doing. And so it is the job of and that the only reason we're actually buying them is because the automobile companies and the oil and gas companies are tricking us into buying gas vehicles. And so it's the job of the government, and they believe that the government has the right to do this, and the government has no rights, but that the government has the right to force us to choose a cleaner alternative, or what they consider to be a cleaner alternative. force us to do the right thing, that we're doing the wrong thing, and that we're helpless. We're doing the wrong thing because we're forced to by powers beyond our control, and that you need an even bigger power beyond anyone's control, i.e. government, to set things straight. That's basically determinism in a nutshell. And Alex Epstein and others, whenever this EV stuff keeps coming up, or it's gas stoves or whatever it is, we need to say, look, folks, determinism is dead. Okay, and this tells the politicians we're hip to their game. We know what kind of stupid little psychological game you're playing with us, and we're not going to accept it. And that way we don't have to play whack-a-mole all the time. So, again, that was Alex Epstein. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, some Newsmax, and it's about the Hunter Biden plea deal falling apart and things surrounding that.
Correspondent Kilmeny Dukar. Kilmeny, good afternoon. We know they're still trying to work out a deal for Hunter, but yesterday was quite a wild scene.
Bianca, John, it sure was. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer says the federal court in Delaware's decision to back out of that deal only adds credibility to their investigation. Comer also pointing out that the Biden family is under more scrutiny than the mainstream media is willing to admit. And the FBI, of course, had told the committee that FD 1023 document detailing an alleged bribery scheme with then Vice President Joe Biden, that was part of an ongoing investigation, even though they wouldn't say what. And then on Wednesday, you had the Justice Department revealing that Hunter Biden is part of an active investigation into potential violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA. And House Republicans, they seem more emboldened than ever following the court's decision. A statement released from Chairman Comer says the evidence uncovered by the Oversight Committee's investigation into the Biden's influence peddling schemes mirrors the evidence put forth by IRS whistleblowers. Comer adds will continue to follow the Biden's money trail to determine whether foreign actors targeted the Bidens. President Biden is compromised and our national security is threatened. Well, Republican Senator Josh Hawley says the judge's decision means that the court has serious concerns about other potential charges.
To me, the foreign bribery allegations potentially touching on his father are by far the most important thing here. I mean, that's the whole reason that his business dealings, Hunter's, are relevant.
And House Speaker Kevin McCarthy weighing in on this on Wednesday, announcing earlier this week that he plans that all of these GOP investigations may rise to the level of an impeachment inquiry.
Well, we have to find at the end. The justice system is fair to all Americans, and not one system for the Biden Inc. family and another for America. So now is the window to show that we have equal justice. That's the real question. Now it's just the window. Is it going to be fair as you treat every other American? That would be the question.
And that is a question that House Republicans will most certainly have for the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, David Weiss, who is set to testify here on Capitol Hill, perhaps late August or early September, about claims from IRS whistleblowers that the Justice Department interfered in their investigation into Hunter Biden.
All right, Kilmeny Dukar live on Capitol Hill. Kilmeny, thank you. And joining us now is House Judiciary Committee member and New Jersey Congressman Jeff Van Drew. Congressman, it's great to see you. Thanks for so much for coming on.
I want to get your reaction to.
Good to be with you.
Let's get your reaction to, what we're hearing about impeachment inquiries. Yes, the Hunter deal's on hold. But in the meantime, Devin Archer's set to come in on Monday, and there does seem to be a ramping up of folks who are willing to come in and possibly tie the sitting president to the Biden family business deals, Congressman.
In plain English, the president is getting in more and more trouble. His family is. There's so much here. And I think you're going to see as time goes along, day by day, week by week, more and more of it is going to be revealed. They just can't keep it contained anymore. You know that we sent a letter in Judiciary on a similar subject, in a sense, something else breaking open, that, Facebook had to give us internal documents that we asked for, not completely redacted, but actually give us the documents as they were. And we were actually going to have a hearing and hold Zuckerberg in contempt of Congress. That has now been canceled. Facebook has turned over a lot of documents. That hearing was literally going to be in a few hours to put him in contempt. And it reveals a lot that the White House constantly was pressuring Facebook, even though Facebook was a little bit hesitant and thought there were First Amendment issues here. The White House would get angry, the administration would get angry, and doing all they could do, and I'm going to use the C word, to censor and take away freedom of speech, our First Amendment right. It's all breaking open. There's a lot going on here. This is going to be a very action-packed month coming up in August. And I think we're going to see a lot
for sure. And we'll definitely want to hear more about what they've turned over from Facebook into the censorship.
Action-packed month coming up. It's already been an action-packed month. Are you kidding me? It's been an action-packed 24 hours.
Don't blink.
Yeah, don't blink. I want to get your thoughts.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's incredible.
There's so much with this administration and so much with this family and so many illegal activities. It's just a matter of us crossing every T and dotting every I, because they're going to try to slip out and get away with what they've done on multiple levels. I mean, there's much more. There's foreign influence in our country. You know that Joe Biden himself was involved. They've even changed their story now.
Serious,
saying,
clearly serious.
Congressman, I want to, real quick, in the time we have left, I want to get your thoughts about this potential indictment now, this third indictment having to do with January 6th. We're waiting to find out if that's going to be handed down. Are you hearing anything on your end? What are your thoughts about it? What are your constituents saying to you about this? I mean, we see that the former president's approval, his ratings, his poll numbers continue to go up. I think Real Clear Politics had him at like 59% the last time I looked earlier this morning. What are you hearing, and what are your constituents telling you about the potential for another indictment?
Know that something's wrong. Even though the legacy media is not covering this stuff, they know that something is wrong. They know it's not right. And frankly, the more that they go after and push on Trump, he's pushing back twice as hard. I mean, I know this is a lot for him and his family, but he's doing a service to the country, because all of this is wrong too. They're deathly afraid of President Trump, because they know when he becomes president of the United States again, he's going to really open everything up, and we're going to go back to being America, and America of freedom, and they're scared.
All right. Representative Jeff Van Drew of my former home state of New Jersey. Congressman, thanks so much. We'll get you back on. We also want...
Thank you. And now, Aristotle for everybody.
Chapter 7. To be and not to be. We ordinarily think of the birth of a living organism as the coming into being of something that did not exist before, and we often refer to the death of a person as his or her passing away. In Aristotle's thought about the changes that occur in the world of nature and the changes that human beings bring about by their effort, the special kind of change that he calls coming to be and passing away is distinguished from all other kinds of change, such as change of place, alteration in quality, and increase or decrease in quantity. This special kind of change in nature is more difficult to understand than other kinds of change. Why? To find out, let us begin with what is easier to understand, the production or destruction of things by human beings. When people move things from one place to another, when they alter or enlarge them, the individual thing that they move, alter, or enlarge remains the self-same thing. It changes only with respect to its attributes, its place, its color, its size. It not only remains the same kind of thing that it was before it changed, after it has been changed, it also persists as this one unique individual thing. The enduring sameness or permanence of the individual thing that undergoes these changes is clear to us from the fact that its identity can be named in the same way before and after the change occurs. This ball, that chair. It is not another ball or another chair, but this one or that one. When someone takes raw materials, such as pieces of wood, and transforms those raw materials into a chair, an artificial thing, something that did not exist before, comes into existence. What before was several pieces of wood have now become this particular chair. Pieces of wood becoming a chair is certainly not the same as this green chair becoming red. The reason is that when the chairs come into being, several separate pieces of wood no longer remain, at least not as several separate pieces of wood, though this chair remains precisely this chair when it changes in color. Before we go from artificial production to natural generation, which is just another name for the process of coming to be, it will be helpful to us if we look a little more closely at what is happening in the easier-to-understand process of artificial production. The help will come from getting some grasp of the meaning of 4 words that were used in the preceding chapter. They are matter, form, potentiality, and actuality. Though what they mean can be understood in the light of common experience and in common sense terms, the words themselves are not words we use frequently in everyday speech. Pieces of wood that are not a chair become pieces of wood that are a chair. When the pieces of wood are not a chair, their not being a chair is a lack of chairness on their part. They are deprived of the form of a chair. Let's use the word privation for this lack of a certain form. There is more in these pieces of wood than the privation of chairness. If that was all there was to it, these pieces of wood could never be made into a chair. In addition to lacking chairness, these pieces of wood must also have the capacity to acquire chairness. Their capacity is inseparably connected with their privation, for if these pieces of wood did not lack the form of a chair, they would not have the capacity for acquiring that form, since not lacking it, they would already have it. Only if when certain materials, such as pieces of wood, lack a certain form, can they have the capacity for acquiring it. Let us call that capacity a potentiality of the materials in question. Another word for potentiality is can be. It makes a great deal of difference whether you say that something is a chair or can be a chair. These pieces of wood are not a chair, but they can be a chair. As I said a moment ago, if they were a chair, they could not become a chair. However, it is not true to say that when certain materials lack a certain form, they always have the potentiality for acquiring it. For example, water and air lack the form of a chair, but unlike wood, water and air are materials that do not have the potentiality for acquiring the form of a chair. Although the potentiality for acquiring a certain form is never present in the materials, unless that form is absent, the mere absence of the form, the lack or privation of it, does not necessarily mean that the materials have the potentiality for acquiring it. Men can make chairs out of wood, but not out of air or water. When the pieces of wood that lack the form of a chair and also have the potentiality for acquiring that form take on that form as a result of a carpenter's skill and effort, we say that the pieces of wood that were potentially a chair have now actually become a chair. Throughout the whole process of becoming, until the very moment when the chair is finally finished, the pieces of wood undergoing transformation were still only potentially a chair. Not until their transformation has been completed do they actually have the form of a chair. When the pieces of wood are actually a chair, their potentiality for becoming a chair has been actualized, and so, of course, it no longer remains as a potentiality. The form the pieces of wood have acquired is the actuality that removes the potentiality that accompanied the lack of that form in the wood but did not accompany the lack of it in water or air. We can now see how these 4 important words, matter, form, potentiality, and actuality, are related. Matter may have or lack a certain form. Lacking it, matter may also have the capacity for acquiring it, which is its potentiality for having that form. But it does not always have such a potentiality when it lacks a certain form, as we saw in the case of water and air as compared with wood. When it acquires the form for which it has a potentiality, that potentiality has been actualized. Having the acquired form has transformed the matter from being a potential chair into being an actual chair. I've been using the words matter and materials interchangeably, but when we are referring to wood on the one hand and water on the other, we are speaking of different kinds of matter. Wood is not just matter, it is a certain kind of matter. Matter having the form of wood, which is different from matter having the form of water. One kind of matter, wood, provides human beings with materials out of which they can make chairs. Another kind, water, does not. The form the matter has, which makes it a certain kind of matter, wood, also gives it a certain potentiality for becoming a chair. Matter, in the form of water, does not have that potentiality. When we understand this simple point, a simple step of reasoning enables us to grasp another important point. Wood can become a chair, but it cannot become an electric light bulb. Water can become a fountain, but it cannot become a chair. Matter, having a certain form, has a limited potentiality for acquiring other forms. This is true of every kind of matter, all the different kinds of materials that people can work on to produce things. Chairs, electric light bulbs, and fountains. Now, suppose there was matter totally deprived of form, utterly formless matter. It would not actually be any kind of matter, but it would also be potentially every kind of matter, since lacking all forms, it would have the capacity to acquire any form. It would have an unlimited potentiality for forms. You would be quite right if, thinking about this, you were to say, hold on, matter without any form might have an unlimited potentiality, an unlimited capacity for acquiring forms, but lacking all forms, it would be actually nothing. What is actually nothing does not exist. Hence, to talk about formless matter is to talk about something that cannot exist. Why, then, you may ask, did I bother to mention it in the first place? What's the point in thinking about it? Aristotle would say that, looked at in one way, you are right in thinking that pure matter, formless matter, is not actually anything, or, in other words, is nothing. You are therefore also right in thinking that formless matter does not exist. But Aristotle would add that, although formless matter is actually nothing, it is also potentially everything. It is potentially every possible kind of thing that can be. Still, you persist in asking, if formless matter does not exist and cannot exist, what is the point in mentioning it or thinking about it? Aristotle's answer is that there would be no need to mention it or think about it if we confined ourselves to trying to understand artificial productions and destructions, the making and unmaking of such things as chairs. But the birth and death of animals are not so easy to understand. Let's take an animal's death first. Our pet rabbit dies, decays, disintegrates, and eventually disappears. The matter that had the form of a rabbit no longer has that form. It now has acquired another form, as would happen if the rabbit were killed and devoured by a wolf. When this happens, matter that was the matter of one kind of thing, rabbit, has now become the matter of another kind of thing, wolf. If you think about this for a moment, you will see that what has occurred here is different from what occurred when wood, which is a certain kind of matter, becomes a chair. Becoming a chair does not cease to be wood. It does not cease to be matter of a certain kind. A certain kind of matter has persisted throughout this change. It can be identified as the subject of the change. These pieces of wood that at one time were not actually a chair have now become actually a chair. But in the transformation that occurred when the wolf killed and devoured the rabbit, a certain kind of matter did not persist throughout the change. The matter of a certain kind of thing, matter having the form of a rabbit, became the matter of another kind of thing, matter having the form of a wolf. The only identifiable subject of this change is matter, not matter of a certain kind, since matter of a particular kind does not persist throughout the change. Let us now turn from death to birth. That pet rabbit of yours came into being as a result of sexual reproduction. Aristotle was as well acquainted with the facts of life as you and I are. The process that results in the birth of a living rabbit began when an ovum of a female rabbit was fertilized by the sperm of a male rabbit. From the moment of fertilization, a new organism has begun to develop. Though, while it is still being carried in the female rabbit's uterus, it is not a separate living thing. The birth of the rabbit is just a phase in the rabbit's process of development. It has been developing within the mother rabbit before being born, and it goes on developing after it is born until it reaches full growth. Birth is nothing but the separation of one living body from another, the baby rabbit from the mother rabbit. And that separation is a local motion, a movement of the baby rabbit from being in one place to being in another, from being inside the mother rabbit to being outside the mother rabbit. Let us now go back to the beginning of the baby rabbit, at the moment when it first came to be. Before that moment, there was the female rabbit's ovum and the male rabbit's sperm. Neither the ovum nor the sperm was actually a rabbit, though both together had the potentiality for becoming a rabbit. The actualization of that potentiality took place at the moment of fertilization, when the matter of the sperm was merged or fused with the matter of ovum. Do the matter of the ovum and the matter of the sperm, in separation from each other, stand in the same relation to the matter of the baby rabbit after fertilization occurs, as the matter of the rabbit stands to the matter of the wolf after the rabbit has been killed and devoured by the wolf? If so, then something like what Aristotle had in mind when he asked us to think about formless matter is the subject of change in the coming to be and passing away of living organisms. It is that which we identify as persisting or enduring in this special kind of change. That is as near as I can come to explaining why Aristotle thought it necessary to mention formless matter. You may think that he went too far, that natural generation can be accounted for in the same way as artificial production. If you do think so, let me ask you to consider one more example. The example is one that Aristotle himself considered. He said that nature proceeds little by little from things lifeless to living things in such a way that it is impossible to determine the exact line of demarcation. He was quite capable of imagining the line between the non-living and the living being crossed when the first living organisms on Earth emerged from non-living matter. In that coming to be of the first living organisms, can we identify the matter that is the subject of this remarkable change as being matter of a certain kind? Does it remain the same kind of matter both before and after the first living organisms came into being? You may not want to go so far as to call it formless matter, but on the other hand, you may find it difficult to identify it as matter of a certain kind, which would mean that it had and retained a certain form. If this is your state of mind, then you understand why Aristotle thought natural generation more difficult to explain than artificial production. And you also understand why he thought it necessary to mention and ask you to think about pure or formless matter, which, of course, does not exist.
And that was Aristotle for Everybody, Difficult Thought Made Easy, by Mortimer J. Adler. And all of this may seem rather abstruse, but it's what he's doing is creating a foundation in this part of the book for later chapters and later ideas. And this is important because this is the way the left works. Although the left likes to deny the importance of foundation, they call it foundationalism, but they use foundation in their attacks on our culture. Look at the attacks that they're experiencing right now in education. The foundation for those attacks was an attack decades ago on history. The left came out and boldly declared one day that history is politics. It's nothing more than politics, and that history, that is slogan, history is written by the winners. And so they kept going over and over and over and over again until they had basically fairly thoroughly brainwashed most of America. And then once you get that done, the history part done, since everything, all educational subjects have a historical base to them, then once you've subverted history, you've now succeeded in setting up the subversion of all other subjects. And so that's how they use the foundation. Back in a minute. Thank you. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. And until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.